The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. This week we're going to cover Austin FC's 1-0 win at home against DC United. We'll talk about what we learned from the latest MLS roster profiles, and we will preview this weekend's away match in Charlotte. And we'll cover all the other Austin FC news, including a very important player signing that you all already know about. But we'll still talk about it anyway and give you some more details. My name's Landon, and I'm joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and we went to a game yesterday in real time, which I think we've talked about before, leaves me still in my emotions. Like I need that extra day usually from a Saturday match to like a Monday to be more reasonable. So luckily, since it was a win, like this is all vibes all the time, right? That's just the way to go.
I was thinking as we were about to start recording that this game feels like longer than a day ago to me, but I guess maybe having it earlier on or whatever, but it feels like it was a week ago already.
Yeah, I think, and it was super weird to like get out of the match, get home, and the sun is still out, and we still had half a day left. Like I had errands around the house to do to finish the laundry and stuff like that. And one of the things that I thought was really cool for being in the stadium, because we ran into you guys in the stadium, was the fact that it was because it was a Sunday match at 1:00. Like there's a lot of families. Like I feel like I saw a lot of little kids walking around the concourse with their families. I think I talked to at least one or two people, like it was the first time they brought their little kids to the match because they could do that and go home, and maybe they like missed part of a nap, but it didn't like wreck the whole next day.
Yeah, one of my coworkers has I think it's like a 4-year-old, and he was like, "Oh, it's an afternoon game. Maybe I'll take Max to it." And I think it's a good thing. Like part of the new schedule strategy for MLS and Apple TV is us being able to watch more games, right? Like I've watched more games the last 2 weeks than I got to for big stretches of last season because all the games were at the same time all the time. And so I would have loved to have watched more games and just was not able to. So that's been really nice. But I think it's good for a lot of reasons, including what you were just saying, just like getting people who would otherwise not come to the games that they can now.
Yeah. So yeah, I thought it was really good. The weather was like perfect, I think, for that. How was the sun on your side?
Sitting, it was a little toasty over in the sun, and I bet the way that things shook out in the second half, I think it was probably a little toasty on the field too.
I think it probably was. And I noticed after halftime, the East Club people were very late in returning to their seats, and many of those people were like, camouflaged as seats, and then. Super weirdly, we ended up being in the Lexus Club this game because our neighbors gave us our tickets. The owner's suite was right behind us. So when we get the one goal, apparently McConaughey was like above our head celebrating, and like the entire section was like turned around and facing the owner's box and not what was going on in the field, which was kind of annoying, but I did appreciate him showing up and like not making the whole show about him and just kind of being a fan as much as you can be when you're a celebrity.
Did I ever tell you my story about going into the owner's box? I think I have. It's been a while. Was
there a butler involved?
There was a butler brother involved. So there was like an event at the stadium down in the field level club about the designing of the Austin FC brand. And so some of the Butler Brothers employees were there giving the presentation. And then I think both Butler brothers were there, but at least Adam was. And Adam, to refresh Moon Tower lore, Adam Butler of Butler Brothers, who designed the Austin FC brand, was my neighbor during the period in which they were designing the brand, but he could not tell me and he knew I was like into the team and doing all this stuff and involved in like the pre-fan culture, but it was like the sue you to hell NDA kind of thing that like he could not tell me what was going on. And so anyway, I see Adam at this like brand thing years later, and we've kind of stayed in touch, and we're leaving at the same time. And so I walk out with him. I was going to give him a shirt. That's what it was. I was going to take him to my car and give him a shirt, a Moon Tower shirt. And so as we're walking out, he just pushes a different button on the elevator. He's like, "Hey, let me show you something." And we go up to the second or third floor, wherever it is, and he takes me into the owner's box, and we're just like running around. And then security comes and finds us and is like, "Hey guys, you can't be here." And Adam's like, "Oh well, we just got off on the wrong floor. Sorry." And he was like, and they're like, "I know that's not true. We've been watching you on security cameras."
Okay, we're buying that at all. Oh my god, that's such a good story, man. Um, okay, let's go on to the news of the week, and let's set that up with when you texted me Tuesday of last week, right? With information. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? It doesn't really matter that much. Information that Christian Ramirez was going to be an Austin FC player, and we trusted that Tom Bogert was like on paternity leave and wouldn't immediately scoop it, and then the son of a gun did it again. So like we almost had a scoop, but we
Yeah,
didn't once
I kn-
again.
I knew it was a risk. Yeah, a little bird told us that that this was gonna happen, but I was working my regular job and trying to get stuff done before the end of the day, and Tommy Scoops got there before us, which is it's fine. That's not what we're here for. And
Right.
that's how Tom's gonna feed that newborn baby. So that's fine.
That's right. And so it's on Thursday. So then on Friday, we get the news officially. Austin FC announced today the club acquired Christian Ramirez off waivers, 59 goals and 17 assists, and 193 regular season matches. So accomplished player, also 34 years old. So he's an accomplished player, but a guy you don't want to count, necessarily want to have to count on playing a lot of minutes, but a player that adds a lot to this Austin team in terms of the needs. And I think maybe if you can talk about the deal, I'll just talk about the designation. Also, he ends up as a supplemental roster player, which is really super useful to Austin FC. I think it's a team that had no senior roster slots available. That's the only way that you can make this work.
Exactly right. And that's what whenever I got the information that we were signing him, I was like, how? That was kind of my first question, because he's older, but this is a guy who's been very in demand for his whole career. So we'll go back and kind of talk about who he is, how he fits, who he is as a person, all that. But I think this is worth covering. Part of the biggest part of this story, right, is that he's a supplemental player. I think it's worth talking about how Austin got him. So this is the waivers list. When a guaranteed contract gets bought out, so he was bought out by the LA Galaxy last week, like a week and a half ago at this point, at time of recording. They bought him out, put him on waivers, but by judging like everything around it, it seems like they still really wanted this guy. They renewed his contract after the end of last season. And then they played him in their Conca Champions game a week and a half ago. They were heavily featuring him in social media posts and YouTube videos as of like 8 days ago. And so something went wrong with their roster build. I think they've been struggling with roster compliance since their MLS Cup win. I'm not sure what changed in the last few weeks. I don't know if something happened that changed it or if this is incompetence on the Galaxy's part. But they did the exact same thing last season, if you remember this, where they got Sean Davis as a free agent in the offseason, and then they bought him out of his contract in the exact same offseason. And so something weird's going on at the Galaxy. But anyway, that's why he was available. How Austin FC got him is through this waivers process. So when a guaranteed contract is bought out, you're placed on the waiver list. Teams can then make a bid for how much of your salary they would be willing to take on. So the player's going to get paid no matter what. So Jossie Zardes, Emiliano Rigoni, all the guys we've bought out over the years, those guys are still getting their paycheck every 2 weeks or every month or whatever it is. And so this waiver process is just saying, okay, he's going to keep getting the paycheck, but if we can have him on our team, we'd be willing to pay this much of his paycheck. And so depending on your bid and your place in that waiver order, which is based on standings, you either will or won't be given that player. His base salary was $525,000 last season, and Austin won the bid with $225K. So Rodolfo Burrell is saying, I will pay $225K of his salary. So that means Austin will pay that part. The Galaxy will continue to pay the rest of his salary. You might say, okay, $225K, that's still above the supplemental threshold. How that works is you're able to use GAM to buy down up to 50% of a player's budget charge. And so senior minimum is 113,000. That times 2 is just over 225K. And so uh it works out that, or yeah, it's around 225K, but it looks like Roto bid that exact number because he knew it would allow him to buy down Ramirez to a supplemental spot. A big question is like why nobody else bid more, which you would seem he would have been uh in demand, even just as even on a senior spot. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen. Great work by Roto here to get him, because if we had more space, I would have said, like in a different scenario, I would have said yes, get Christian Ramirez to be your backup striker, regardless of like at 500K, that might be worth it too. But to get him on a supplemental is amazing.
Yeah, that's great. Like, you talked about great capology work. I feel like maybe this is Roto watched like a lot of Jeopardy in his life, a lot of Final Jeopardy, and figured out the strategy behind bidding, and that's kind of what he would manage to
Yeah.
do here. So maybe Alex Trebek deserves some kind of recognition for this. So, once again, the man knows what he's doing when it comes to like manipulating budgets and rosters. And it hasn't necessarily always 100% come to fruition on the field. But I mean, I think when we talk about the game itself, we could talk a little bit more about like the big picture thing, because I've got pretty positive vibes about this team, and we'll talk about a lot of reasons why when we're talking about the matches. But yeah, great on him. And so this is a guy. So he's older, but I think he scored. I know he had like a down year last year in 25 of the Galaxy, but he scored 13 goals in 2023 for Columbus, 10 goals in 2024 for Columbus. So he's very recently very productive. And he doesn't seem to have the kind of game where he doesn't seem to have the same kind of mileage on his tires at his age that maybe like Giassi had when he came here. And I don't know that there's like a really good way to describe that. Maybe you can be more articulate about it, but that's the sense I get from him as a player.
Yeah, I mean, like going through his history. So, like you said, 34 years old, originally from California, also nicknamed Superman from his time in Minnesota. So we have 2 Supermen on the team now. It would be very cool later in the season if him and Vasquez can like link up on a goal and both do the Superman celebration together. That would be pretty epic. But yeah, it started off in Minnesota with their NASL team, moved up to MLS with that team, and continued playing with the MLS team and did really well. Has since moved on, played for LAFC, Houston Dynamo. He played for Aberdeen in Scotland, came back to the US, played for Columbus and LA Galaxy. But talking about his scoring record and his output, he's often been a super sub or like a role player behind other star players. And so it seems like for a lot of his career, he was kind of not prioritizing being the star on a team and being the guy, but just like, I'm going to go play for a good team. And in doing that, I think it probably took away some of his minutes. He's also had a few minor injuries here and there, but throughout his whole career, he has, or sorry, I think I limited it to MLS minutes when I was looking at these stats, but he has 0.5 goals per 90 and over 0.6 goals and assists per 90 throughout all of his MLS career, which is very, very good. He's not playing full seasons in this and like often super sub, but so you look at just the raw numbers of how many goals or how many assists he had in a given season, and they're good, but they're not mind blowing. If you look at the per 90 stats, though, that's very, very good.
Yeah, it is very good. And this is exactly what Austin needs right now. I think this is the most exciting part. We're not relying on him to come in and be the primary striker and have to make a difference for this club, but you're basically asking him to do what he does in this match, and what you talked about his expertise is like being a super sub and making a difference in a limited amount of minutes.
I do expect him to get starts this year, though. Like whether it be for rotation purposes or because Uzuni doesn't find form and he just looks like a better option. I don't think you can rely on him at his age to do that every week, but we will see him start games.
Well, maybe you took these notes too. Like talk to us about him as a cultural fit, and then we can kind of go into like where we expect to see him play.
Yeah, he really experienced player. I think he can fill in some of the leadership that we lost with Rubio and Cascante and some of the older guys who left the team. Seems to be really well liked everywhere he goes by teammates and by fans. And then he's bilingual. He speaks Spanish really well. So I think that's important as an older guy in a locker room where a lot of the guys speak Spanish and don't speak great English, and vice versa. To have a guy in a leadership position who can speak very comfortably to everybody in there, that's really, really positive.
Okay, and then player, we've talked about this a little bit just in terms of what we expect out of him, like in terms of output, but maybe what do you see him just as like the way he plays style wise?
Yeah, he's not so different from Brandon Vasquez. Like he's got good size, really intelligent with the way he moves in the box, good in the air, can score with his head. I think we'll get onto all of those points that I just made as we start talking about the game a little later. But so he can play off of center backs and play just like traditional striker stuff, but then also drops into midfield, can connect with the midfield there, and then has a lot of positional flexibility. Where like in Columbus, he had 8 goals and 6 assists playing not striker. Essentially, he was playing as like a almost like a 10 or a winger at times, where he would play underneath Cucho Hernandez, and then would drop in midfield or pull really wide and build up, playing as a connector, and then would like even distribute and kind of play make at times from those positions. And then Cucho Hernandez and Diego Rossi were just free to kind of go wherever they wanted, just go find the ball, make stuff happen. And as they would progress up the field, Ramirez would then fill in the gaps and crash the box in those areas. And he was really dangerous in those moments. So I think it shows his intelligence, shows his flexibility, and shows his skill set that he can do all of those things and be successful and productive playing in a few different positions, really. He's not like he's no spring chicken. He's not going to stretch those back lines and kind of scare people with speed, but really solid, flexible option coming off the bench or playing around the other players that we have on the field.
What excites me about the way that you talked about him is we have a lot of guys that can do different things, but like the way you describe him is he's a guy that like thrives on and enjoys doing different things and like playing off other players and finding his spaces, maybe in a like a more intentional way than some people that can do it, but like don't really want to do it.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have an ego about it. Like he seems happy to do that. It's like, yeah, if someone else is playing in that spot, I'll come over here. I think he just wants to be on the field and play. And if playing in a different position lets that happen, then he's happy.
Okay, well, all that discussion. Oh yeah, we'll come to bear, here when we talk about the game. So, do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want to wrap us up with?
I have some stats here that
okay
kind of blew my mind a little bit. So, you all listening to this now know that he came in on his Austin debut, 1 day of training, and like a light training session the day before the game. Comes in the second half and ends up scoring the winning goal. If you look back across his career, he has played for 9 professional clubs if we count both of the Minnesota teams, like Minnesota NASL and Minnesota MLS. 9 clubs. He has scored in his debut for 6 of them.
Oh, wow.
And then for one of the teams he didn't score in his debut, which was Columbus, he didn't score in the first one as a sub, but then started the second game and scored a brace in that game.
Wow.
That is an insane stat to have like that many debuts and that many goals in your debut. It's just crazy.
That is such a wild fact. I'm glad you went and looked that up.
Yeah, but I guess it was destined, right? Like
it was meant to be.
Knew,
yeah, for sure.
Nico, put me in. I got this. All right, let's maybe take a break. We will come back and dig into this DC United game a little bit more. When no one is around. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education. And they have their own podcast called Summary Judgment that you can check out wherever you get your podcasts.
You can go to FVF.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's FVF.law. Amplify Credit Union is a member-owned financial cooperative that served the needs of Central Texans for over 5 decades. As a credit union, Amplify has no shareholders or parent companies. That means more of your money stays in the community.
Amplify has been the home of fee-free banking since 2022. Their free checking accounts come with 0 overdraft fees or minimum balances. That means Amplify's fee-free checking accounts help you get more mileage from your everyday spending.
Amplify membership is open to any Texas resident. Learn to trust your bank again at Amplify Credit Union. To learn more and to register for free parking at the Esperanza branch on game day, go to www.goamplify.com/moontower. All right, we are back. We're going to dig into this home win against DC United. We already know how it ended. We already know who the superhero was at the end of the game. But let's start at the beginning. What were our pre-game narratives coming into this one, Jeremiah?
Well, one, I love that we're in the point in the season where really the only pregame narratives are related to like who's healthy and available, and we're on a streak of bad luck. The coach and one of the star players are fighting, like many of the other pregame narratives we've had, in the past. So I think the biggest thing, which is we weren't surprised by, is when you looked at the injury report, Robert Taylor goes on to that list of players being out. Kimi Biru comes back to the players being in, although I guess he wasn't out for injury, so he wasn't on that report. And we heard a guy who talked to a guy whose sister's aunt's second cousin's nephew says that Mikel Dessler says that he'll be back next week, which feels good for this team.
I think we got confirmation from Nico after the game as well that they expect or hope Dessler will be available next weekend. We'll touch on the rest of the scouting or the rest of the injury report a bit later on the show. But so yeah, in the starting 11, Biru is the only change. If you look at the match day roster, Micah Burton and Riley Thomas are off the roster, and then Guilherme Biru, Sabovic are in to the match day roster. And then with Robert Taylor coming out injured from that last game, that leaves one extra spot open. Christian Ramirez steps in to the bench. We weren't sure if we would see him just because it happened so fast. He had just gotten here a day or two before, so it was like, okay, he's been playing, right? Like he's played games for the Galaxy, played in preseason, played in CONCACAF Champions. And so he's fit. Like that's often the trouble with new signings, right? Is they're coming from off season, they're doing whatever, they haven't had a preseason, aren't match fit yet. That's not the case for him. And so, yeah, throw him on there. Like, would you rather have him or Riley Thomas on the bench? Like, I think that's a no-brainer, but it was really good to see when it came out.
Yeah, that's not even a debate. And I ran into a friend of mine at halftime, and he's like, first of all, Mirituzuni's terrible, but then like second of all, it would be great if we had Ramirez, but like Josh, this is going back to like my history on the team. But Austin FC never lets a new guy like step in and play right away when he's new. And I'm glad that you brought up the fact that there are reasons why the new guys didn't get to play before. And there's a reason why this new guy got to play and it worked out really, really well.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the lineup and formation was the same except Biru in for Kolmanic. The attacking shape was, well, I say it was the same. It wasn't really. If you look at the kind of base 4-2-3-1 that we were looking at, they were still defending in a 4-4-2, but then the attacking shape, you would see Biru staying a bit more conservative and kind of dropping into a back three as we were building up more often and letting Gallagher push up high. I think that was probably a strategy to keep Ty Baribo under wraps, which they ended up doing a very good job of.
Hell of a job.
Not giving up anything in transition, not letting them have any space to exploit up those sides by having some extra numbers deep there. And it worked out. I think Austin in the first half was the better team. DC had no real ideas, very few attacking moments. I think Austin, it's partly DC's not that good. They have a few really good players, but for the most part, they looked pretty poor. I think Austin deserves some credit for that, just in their defensive shape and their defensive work. And then the counter press, again, this is something that we've seen in these preseason games and in that first game where Austin loses the ball. They swarm really quickly and will often win the ball back. And that's where a lot of our more dangerous moments came from, was in moments like that. We need to do it more consistently, but it's very clearly part of the game plan is to win those balls back quickly if we lose them.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to talk about lineup-wise, because we talk about Austin, but when you saw me before the match, you're like, "Oh well, Jared Stroud's going to be coming down your side, so be sure to boo him wholeheartedly." And one of the things is this new this year, they don't actually announce the opposing lineup at all. They just throw it up on the screen, right? So we didn't get the
Well,
chance to boo Jared Stroud.
I think they did do it in at least the New York game, that
Okay.
preseason one. I think they did announce it, and so I was listening for it, and I was like, I want to see if people boo Jared Stroud, but I think you're right. I don't think they did it in this game.
Yeah, I don't remember Minnesota, but I'm certain they didn't do it in this game because that was Jackson Bentley. If there's one thing he loves, it's booing an opponent. And he was
I
loaded up and ready to go, and we didn't get the
I wonder
chance.
if that's why. Like, it's because they knew people would boo Jared Stroud. We got an Instagram DM from Justin Wiseman asking about this, and he says like, Jared Stroud is probably one of the biggest villains in Austin FC history. Why didn't people boo him more? And I know anecdotally, like some of our friends did. They said that they gave it to him as he was going into the tunnel, like before warmups and then at halftime and after the game. So, um, yeah, I'm curious if do you think if they announced it, like, is this an Austin FC sicko bubble thing where we would have booed him, but the general stadium maybe wouldn't have even clocked it, or do you think there would have been an audible boo had they announced his name?
I don't think enough people even know who he is or even remember his time in Austin. I mean, I think for us, he especially became a villain with the St. Louis game, but I don't know if the average person remembers that. I know the people around me when I told them that story, they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that," but they weren't immediately like F. Jared Stroud, off the tops of their
Yeah,
heads. Like when you draw the context, they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember that. He's kind of a jerk," but like they didn't know beforehand.
yeah. We'll have more on Jared Stroud later. Um, so Austin started off dangerous early on. I think in the second or third minute, we get 3 corners in a row. The second one leads to an Ilie header that Johnson saves. Ilie goes to ground and gets another chance at it that also gets saved, and then it gets cleared out. The third one, Biru gets a really strong header on it, and Johnson, this is probably the best save of the game. Johnson goes down, maybe in the top 2. There's another really good one later, but Johnson makes a really nice save on this header and keeps Austin from going ahead in the first 3 or 4 minutes, which would have been really huge. But looking at set pieces, Torres's service has been really, really good. And so if we're looking at kind of the strategy throughout the game, both from corners and from like spot kicks in the field, what they're often doing is looking for someone on the backside to either head it back across or some of like the open play fouls where Torres was taking the free kick from deeper in the field. He would look for Nelson or someone else way deep out on the right, and you would essentially get like a cross from the end line. And one of those, Biru ends up cutting it out because he doesn't know Nelson's behind him or thinks it's not going to get to him. But some really like if what you're going to do is, okay, I'm taking a corner, I'm going to hit it to the back post for Svatak to then head it back across goal. Like we tried that quite a bit with Cascante when he was here. I think the difference in the success, or part of the difference in the success, is Torres is able to actually hit Svatak in the head pretty consistently. And so, like having everyone else crash the box, you play it to the backside, Svatak heads it back across into the crowd. That's a really dangerous moment. And it didn't pay off in this game that way, but um, just to have a guy with that kind of service is really good. And I think it's really interesting the way that, like, if Austin is not going to score in open play, to have this kind of set piece proficiency and then bringing Biru back in the lineup. We talked about this last week. Swapping Biru for Coleman, that's like a 6-inch swing in their heights, right? So having him back on the field, Austin can be a pretty dangerous team on these set pieces. So I'll be curious to see how that develops throughout the season.
Yeah, and Torres is good enough at it that there was like one that he really overcooked, and I noticed it. I'm like, wow, that was not what we've grown to expect. And in the past, like it's 50-50 on whether the ball is going to end up anywhere near where it should be
Right.
or not. So the fact that it was notable that he kind of screwed one up was, I think, a real testament to how good he was on the night and has been
Yeah,
since the season started.
for sure. So yeah, DC had no ideas, very few attacking moments. There was one Nelson chance late in the first half that comes from kind of a give and go between Gallagher and Rosales on the right side. They find Ilie central. He turns, splits the line to find Torres in the middle of the field, just outside the box. He turns, plays Nelson into the box. He gets closed down pretty quickly. He gets a shot off, but he didn't have a great chance just because of the DC players closing him down. But one of our few kind of open play chances in the first half. We go into halftime. Second half starts pretty ugly and looks like a pinball game. Just the balls up in the air, going off heads back and forth. But we end up getting a good chance in the 57th minute. This is from a goal kick. Stuver kicks it long. Rosales uses his strength. I think this is kind of I talked about Rosales looking smaller than I expected him to. He does not play small on the field. He is so strong. You look how broad his shoulders are. Like, he can hold guys off. He can fight past players. He can go in for hard tackles and hold his own. So he holds this ball up, lays it off to Dani. Dani dribbles 2 DC players, plays forward to Torres centrally again. He faces goal, winds up, smacks a shot towards the far post. This is the other save that I was talking about. Johnson is able to get down across goal and gets some fingers to it and just pushes it wide of that far post. But that one was going in. It was on frame. So really good little sequence there. Not long after that, Austin start to look tired. They start to look sloppy. And you see Nico Estevez call for substitutions. And it's Besart Sabovic and Christian Ramirez, which again, it's like we didn't even know this time last week on our last show. We didn't know he was signed yet. We didn't know he was going to be here. And here he is getting subbed onto the game to eventually score the game winner. But Sabovic comes on for Ilie, Ramirez for Nelson. Rosales goes to the left wing. Torres goes to the right wing. And then we have 2 strikers up top. A bit later on, Fodre comes on for Rosales at that left wing. So like you knew Nico was going for it when we have ostensibly 3 strikers on the field at the same time. After the subs, Biru takes a bicycle kick to the Svatak takes a bicycle kick to the face from Biru and splits his eyebrow open. The game has to stop while they make his head stop bleeding.
Weren't there 2 bicycle kicks on the same sequence? Did somebody else try one too?
I think maybe it was
Dani?
Ramirez tried on the second
Yeah.
go, but he didn't actually get anywhere close. But yeah, Svatak was going in for a header while Biru was winding up for the bike, and he splits Svati's eyebrow open.
Yeah, and it's very Svatak to get up, come off the field, although I feel like he was still bleeding a little bit on the ball. Like I feel like maybe they should have made him stay out for longer than they did, but he was obviously fine because he's Ukrainian.
Yeah. I love him. So the game stays ugly. Like the whole second half was ugly. We're playing poor passes. We're losing the ball in really stupid ways. But the fresh legs that came on at least brought some energy, which I think indirectly leads to this goal that we finally get in the 82nd minute. So in the build up to that goal, we lose the ball. CJ Fodre, for his faults and as much as we criticize him, when he is on the field, he essentially just never stops running. He is sprinting full speed the entire 5 or 10 or 20 minutes that he's on the field. And that's what he did in this one. So CJ hustles back, picks a DC player's pocket, and we're back the other way. John Gallagher draws a foul. Talking about set pieces again, Torres takes this free kick from wide right. We put numbers in the box. The service is really good towards that back post. And there's Austin players in the area. It needs to be dealt with in one way or another. Sean Johnson, if you want to... my regular PSA against trusting FOTMob stats, Sean Johnson had the highest score for any player in this game on FOTMob for those 2 saves. What it did not, what FOTMob's algorithm cannot track is the absolute howler he had on this play, because he runs out launches himself at the ball to punch it, gets nowhere near it. And so he is now knocked over their biggest and best center back, is laying on the ground. The ball bounces off the back of a DC player. Sabovic gets to the rebound, hits a low shot on frame. And I think Biru's there and tries to redirect it, but there's like 3 DC players on the goal line. It bounces up off of one of them, pops up perfectly for Ramirez waiting on that backside, and he punches it in with his head. And I think Ramirez deserves some credit for this, for just being in the right spot. But if you watch the replay, he essentially has to like jump backwards to get his head on the ball. And so he doesn't get a lot of power, but it's enough to get it in. And so to have the reaction to kind of contort his body and still be able to get enough power, like to have the core strength to get enough juice on the ball to get it in, like it is really good. But back to the CJ hustle, like the counter pressing, playing for set pieces, the effort plays like this. Like if we're not going to be high producers in open play, we have to keep doing stuff like this to give ourselves a chance. And we did it late in this game when it didn't really look like there was much in it left anymore.
Yeah, you talked about maybe we criticize CJ, but I'd only argue against people that feel like he should be starting. I feel like if you want a guy that can run for, like you just said, 10 or 20 minutes and make a difference in a short amount of time, like that is the dude to do that. I just don't know that.
Absolutely.
I don't know that he has more tools than that, right now, and maybe he'll develop it, or at this point maybe he won't. But that reminded me, if you go back a few minutes before that goal, about 10 minutes before that goal, there's a very similar situation at 68 where Austin has 4 shots in the box and Sean Johnson kind of biffs everything and they still failed. I think all 4 shots were from defenders, so that maybe explains why none of them went in. But I just remember then when the Ramirez, so I guess it's 15 minutes later, when the Ramirez thing happens, I'm like, holy crap, are we about to do the exact same thing again? Like have all these golden chances inside of the box and not convert. And then how are we going to find joy in talking about this 2 weeks in a row on Monday after we blew a win to be a draw, even though we're the better team? So very relieved whenever the goal happened for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, and then they get a chance to redeem themselves for the end of the Minnesota game, right? Where it's like a similar amount of time, like focus up, close it down, get these 3 points. And Austin's able to do it. Like they keep DC from really getting any dangerous chances for those last 10. It was probably like 12 minutes with the long added time there. But yeah, they were able to see it out.
It was 6 minutes added time. Jackson and I bet on how much added time there is in every match, and I guess 4, and he went over, and he was right. So it was 6 for this one. So I always know added time.
There's one last chance in the game. Long, hopeful ball for Uzuni. He doesn't really have a chance on it. Just the placement wasn't that good. Bartlett, their center back, cuts it out, and then under hits his back pass to the keeper, and Uzuni's able to cut it out. Tries to touch it around Johnson. Johnson puts him off just enough to where another defender is able to get there, and Uzuni gets off a half shot, but it bounces off the defender's shins. I've seen a lot of people really exasperated by this one. I don't think it was that bad. You would still hope that your DP player does more with that, but I don't think it was definitely not Uzuni's worst moment in an Austin FC jersey by far, I think.
Well, there are many candidates. I will say I did thought it was real bad, and I can tell you exactly why. And you went back to the Johnson moment. When Johnson tips that ball and he steps over, that ball is on his foot. Johnson's laying on the ground. There's the whole goal. If he just first times that anywhere in the general direction of the net, maybe he misses, but that was his best chance for it to go in. Because then once he doesn't take the one-time shot there, and once he like takes a dribble, then everybody gets back, and like I can see where he's doing his best to make a play out of it. But he did have a moment where that he absolutely could have had in my mind, have like a wide open goal and didn't take advantage of it. And I feel like a little bit of that's just like his mentality.
Yeah, I would have to watch it back again. I didn't think that he necessarily was going to be able to get the shot away before the defender got there, but either way, like I think if Facundo Torres finds himself in that situation, like his dribbling and foot skill is good enough that he makes it work and makes it happen. And Uzuni is Uh,
Not that.
more of a at his best is still like a blunt force object and is not known for like that tight footwork dribbling stuff. So um I don't know. I don't think it was terrible in and of itself, but when you add it to the top of the pile, it's it doesn't look great.
Hey, one thing I was also thinking about when we managed to close out the match, this time the last sub is John Bell in for Torres, which I thought was a smart move to preserve the victory. Did Austin do that against Minnesota, or did we just kind of play with who we had?
Well, they were gonna take Torres off for Bell, and that's when um Taylor called for the sub and they delayed the sub. And so if everything had
Ah,
gone to plan, we would have had Torres off the field, Bell on to go to a back five at the end of the Minnesota game. But instead, Taylor needs the sub and we don't get it in time. We don't like get the injury substitution off because Taylor doesn't go down. And so we don't get to make the change. We do end up making the change just to get fresh legs on the field, but it was a little bit too late.
so maybe the lesson learned here is that. Oh no, that was at 90. I was going to say maybe he makes it a little earlier, but he made it at the same point in time when he was going to make it before.
He did make the other subs, like called the other subs, I think at like the 63rd minute or something like that. They didn't go on until a bit later, but I think if we're gonna play this way and kind of do that counter pressing, play with that kind of intensity in the middle of the field there, I think early subs might be a thing that Nico needs to go to a bit more, especially early on, like in the heat when we're still kind of building into midseason form. Like use those subs, get fresh legs on. Maybe they're not as good, but the energy, if we're going to play this way, is worth doing. So that'll be interesting to watch as time goes on too.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to transition into sort of the wrap up of the game because one thing that I've talked about off the top is like these subs, and especially when you think about the fact that there are other guys available, like there are competent, dangerous MLS players, especially guys in limited time like Ramirez and like CJ. And hopefully at some point when Ilie is not a full time starter and come off the bench and like help kill out a game, like this is the deepest team that Austin's had in a while, and it feels like, despite national pundits takes otherwise, like this is the team that there's a lot of complementary skills. Is it imperfect? Absolutely, right? Are there people who kind of do the same thing, and you wish you had different people that could do whatever? But like you could definitely see ways for these guys to play together in a way that Austin hasn't had in a long time, and maybe has never had. And maybe 2022 success was just like everybody stayed healthy, and Austin didn't need to.
Yeah.
But even when a few guys down, like you can see like what Roto's trying to and has built here, and so that's super encouraging for me. Given it's DC United was terrible last year, so maybe it doesn't mean a lot, but like the pieces seem to be there, and hopefully they just all connect.
Yeah. I mean, there's a likely, and I was gonna say realistic, it's a likely future this season where Nico goes to his bench and he has John Gallagher, Ilie Sanchez, John Bell, Robert Taylor, Besard Sabovic. Like, are any of these guys first choice on an MLS Cup winning team? No, but they are very good depth on any MLS team, pretty much. And so yeah, I think you're right. It's the whole roster is still not quite there, but that part of it is better than it's ever been for Austin.
Yeah, and the fact that you talked about like guys like, and this will get even more real in the future, but like the fact that Riley Thomas and Micah Burton aren't making the game to 20, those are the kind of players that have in the past like made it repeatedly. So that this is a good thing. So I like that. I liked almost everything outside of the finishing. I don't even know if it was the final third. It was like just the finishing in the box itself. Like I felt like we missed opportunity, but Austin had more possession. Every number you look at, way more possession, way more shots on target, more corners, more just generally dangerous, like clearly the better team on the night, and we're lucky the results came out. So that was the thing that I took out of it that was super positive.
Yeah, I think one of the other positives I'll take is the defensive effort. Again, not a great team, a little bit one-dimensional as far as who the threats are on the field, but you play who you play, and Austin strangled them to death. They had no chances, could not create anything. It'll be interesting to see what happens when we play a better attacking team and to see if they can keep that up. But Yeah, we're not. We'll talk about dislikes and not creating a lot of open play chances, but if we can keep the set piece form up and keep the defensive form up, it won't matter as much. Like, it would be great if we could figure out how to score from open play more often, and I hope they do, but this is a good building block to start with.
Yeah, I think we've talked about Ramirez a lot. He makes the bench on the MLS Team of the Week, coming off the bench scoring a goal. So take that like whatever for whatever you see necessary. So I'll count that as a thing I like.
He
Going
wasn't,
online,
like, he wasn't super involved in the game during his time on the field, so,
no,
like,
he got the
it's one
goal.
of those things, like, if a defender scores, then he's on the team of the week. A guy scores a game-winning goal on his debut, team of the week, let's go for it.
Sure. Yeah, we're not like too analytical on this one. Didn't like, don't argue with people on Twitter, man. He goes, I don't even know who it was, but he goes on Twitter like right after the match, and like calls out somebody who said he wasn't that great. Like, don't do that.
It was a Galaxy fan essentially saying, "I'm so glad Christian Ramirez isn't on the team anymore." And Ramirez posts a really passive-aggressive, backhanded statement, um, which I thought was funny. I think it's a bad idea. I did think it was funny, though. If he saves it for these specific moments, and only these moments, I'm fine with it, but if he goes full Fagundes and is fighting with fans on Twitter the whole season, that I'll have a different take on that then.
Yeah, and just like us, like Christian Ramirez also he was done at 4 o'clock on Sunday and had a full day to sit around on the couch and read the internet or whatever he might do. You know, he had plenty of free time and, you know, he chose to use it that way. Maybe that's the way that it should or shouldn't have done, but that's what he did.
Um, so let's go to what we didn't like about the game. I'll say I just really hated that Jared Stroud, in one fluid motion, got megged by Facundo Torres and earned a yellow card for the challenge. And then I hated when he just whiffed on a ball that just a very simple pass was played to him and he just missed it and it rolled out of bounds. Hated that. And I hated to see him get subbed off at halftime.
You hated that he was so bad that he got subbed off at halftime
Yeah, you really hate to
for no
see it. It's
reason
just
other than
really
he was
sad.
terrible. Yeah, I'm sure. Um,
Um, Ty Baribo, another note, on the rewatch, I noticed some of this in the stadium, but on the rewatch, absolute heel, this guy. He was playing pretty dirty. He got, one time in a corner kick, he just drops like a sack of potatoes leaning up against Brendan Hines-Ike. Brendan Hines-Ike is a statue, is not moving, and he drops to the ground trying to draw a foul.
I
The ref
remember that.
sees it
Oh,
happening, and the ref is just like, "Come here, dude. Like, you can't do that." And then later on, another corner kick, I think it's DC's corner, that he just like full on body charges. I think Heinz-Ike again just goes right through him, carries him like 3 yards, and then drops him into the ground. And the AR sees it and informs the center ref, and they call a foul in the box and send it the other way for a Brad Stuver free kick there. And Baribo is furious, and he's just talking trash, like looking at the AR, who's a woman in this game, so bad optics on top of whatever, like however he was acting anyway. The fact that it was like a small woman that he's doing this, making eye contact, just cursing at her, just going and going and going for like 45 seconds straight. I didn't really know that much about him except for that he scores a bunch of goals. And after watching him like comport himself on the field in such a way, I was glad to see him not get absolutely anything out of this game.
I love that level of petty. But this is the petty you are. Not that petty, but this petty.
Yeah.
What about
call back from a former conversation.
yeah, call back from this morning. Yeah. Didn't love love Joseph Rosales in one way. And I loved him like dribbling dudes. I just don't feel like he's again in a place where he's most successful because he seems to kind of clog up the middle of the field with where he's playing.
Yeah, whenever he signed, Mike and Steph talked to is it the Looney Bin?
Yeah.
when they do their little match previews, like they talk to those guys, and one of the things they said is that Rosales is kind of one-footed. I think it stands out even more by playing him on the right over there, where there's a moment where Rosales received on the right, he beats a couple of players on the dribble and just like cutting back and forth, spinning, turning, and he ends up chipping a ball over the top into the box for Torres that goes a little long, but he had him a second earlier, but he would have had to play the ball with his right foot. Instead, cuts it back and tries to play it with his left. And it's a little late. Torres has to like time it a little weird. And it's a little awkward. There's some other moments where it's like, okay, if you just use your right foot here, you're not going to have the trouble that you're having. And I think to defend him a little bit, there's a lot of moments where he's receiving it over on the right. He has Gallagher on the overlap, and there's 3 defenders there to cover the 2 of them, and there's nobody else in sight to like play. Like there's no triangle there to kind of play combination off of. So I think part of it was a structural issue with him just not having options to play to. But there's other moments where there was stuff there that he did not take advantage of because he did not want to take it to the inline on his right foot, or he insisted on cutting back in onto his left foot to play a ball. And he's such a good player that you have to have him on the field. And I don't think playing him on the right wing is getting the best out of him. That we need to figure out a way to get him more involved because he's too good to not have an impact in the attack. He is having an impact on the field, no doubt about that. I think he's in the counter pressing and hold up play and kind of ball retention. He keeps the ball quite well too. But as far as creating threat on the offensive side, he's not doing a lot of that. And we have to find a way to get him involved there.
Well, so if in a dream world where Owen Wolf comes back next week and Owen's available to play on the right, where do you put Rosales on the field to get the best out of him?
The only other thing you could say is to do like you have to change the shape, which I don't know that I'm fully a fan of, just because we've been doing this and it's not been great, but I don't know that the actual shape or the positions of the players is the thing. Like everyone else seems to be in the position that suits them pretty well. So I don't know. I think right now it's worth a try to swap him and Nelson, like we said last week, because Nelson seems. How many times did Nelson go to the inline on his left foot, which is his weak foot, by the way? Like,
Yeah.
his right foot is his strong one, but he's so regularly and so comfortably will go to his left and go to the inline that direction. Why couldn't he do that on the other side and let Rosales play where he's more comfortable? Like, I don't know. I don't know the answer. I think another thing worth looking out for is what if Owen doesn't play on the wing and he takes Ilie's spot? Like, that's the thing to look out for. I don't know if it's a good idea, but it would be an interesting idea.
Yeah. Do you think he would take Ilie's spot, or do you like where Ilie's playing directly, or do you see like him and Dani and those like dual 8 kind of things?
Yeah, like Dani and Ilie were playing more or less an interchangeable role. I think like Ilie is less likely to run into the box and kind of that finishing shape in the final third. But as far as like who's dropping back to pick up the ball, who's shifting around, they were more or less level. And if you look at kind of like average position on like SofaScore does like an average position in like heat maps, they're pretty level. So I think they really are playing like a true double pivot there. You could put Owen there. Like, I don't see why you couldn't. Like, I think he would need to adapt his game and kind of learn to play a little bit more defensively at times. But as far as skill set and capability goes, like, I don't see why he couldn't play in that spot. So, and then you don't have to take one of your other better players off the field. So I think it could work there, but I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, what other notes do we not cover on this match before we go ahead and take a break and do some news? And I mean, well, one thing is like, man, Sabovic, he's killing me. I feel like he's good at turning the ball over. I feel like he's good at picking up cards. I feel like he should be better than he is.
There was one moment where he receives on the run and is like coasting forward, carrying the ball, like beats a couple of players. And I'm like, this is the guy that I watched film of like after we signed him. This is the guy I saw. But it existed for like a 10-second period. And he was mostly doing kind of dumb stuff the rest of the time he's on the field.
Is there anybody else you want to talk about?
No, I mean, like, Biru lost the ball in some really dumb situations. Overall, I think he had pretty solid game defensively, and then getting involved in the offense too, but he needs to be smarter in those spots. Dani was really good at times and then really sloppy later on at times. So again, you want to see the consistency from him and put together that full performance. But yeah, I think that's probably all. John Gallagher had a good game. It's I think you still, as soon as Dessler's fit, I think you still have to swap him in. Just Dessler's just that good, but Gallagher's doing really well in the meantime.
And we talk about this way with him all the time, but like if you could put Dessler in, and then also means John can spell Dessler or John can spell a winger,
Yeah,
both, and he can be his most productive.
absolutely. All right, well, let's take a break. We're going to come back and talk about the new MLS roster profiles, which we did learn some pretty interesting stuff from those. We'll also preview the Charlotte game, first road game, and another Eastern Conference game here early in the season. So hang tight. We'll be right back.
Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by Sage Wilson Realty. Are you looking to score your next home? While rates are back to their lowest level since 2022, don't get caught offside in this market.
The right strategy can turn today's opportunity into your winning goal. If you're looking for Sage Real Estate advice in Austin, contact our friends at Sage Wilson Realty. Be sure to check them out online at sagewilson.com.
And our premier sponsor is McGuire Woods Consulting, helping clients in the public affairs space, from lobbying at the local, statewide, and federal levels to digital and communications campaigns across the country.
McGuire Woods Consulting has offices in 10 MLS cities and is proud to support Moon Tower Soccer and support Austin FC's march to the playoffs. Contact our friends at McGuire Woods Consulting at mwcllc.com for more information. All right, we are back. We will get into the Charlotte preview here in a bit, but first, let's talk about this new MLS roster profile drop that we got. Kind of to very little fanfare. MLS did not make a big deal about it, and also did not announce some of the rules that we're maybe thinking were implemented based on what we learned from this. So what we got out of here is that Jaden Nelson is not listed as one of the international players, which he was on the last one of these that came out. And so we've talked about the impending or potential change to the rule where Canadians would no longer count as international players on US-based teams. If this document is to be believed, it seems like maybe that is true now, but MLS has not made any announcements to that fact.
Which is very MLS. Obviously benefits Austin. And like it's good to know, but it's one of these oddities that comes up in this league that I can't really explain, but it's net positive. I think it's all we can say.
Yeah. So that leaves us, we have 6 remaining international roster slots total after trading those 2 away for the first half of the season. According to this document, again, we have 5 of those filled, 1 empty. What that means is like Roto could trade this one too. And maybe he will. Maybe we'll get that news here pretty soon. But for all of the Austin FC2 sickos out there who have been dying to see Jorge Alastue on this first team, I don't think he's going to get a first team contract with this open spot. But if I understand the rules correct, we do need that international spot open in order for him to even get those short-term call-ups. If we needed to call him up in a bench, that opens that back up. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him keep it for something like that, but I also wouldn't be shocked if we found out that he sold it tomorrow.
Yeah, what I hope is that what this might allow him to do is sign one of the players that we want to add to this team during the summer window with that slot, and then sell the other 2 still, like for the rest of the year, which would, net roster build probably be a really strong addition to what Austin's currently doing.
Yeah, for sure. This was released, I think, the same day as the Christian Ramirez signing. So Ramirez does not appear on this, but we know from the press release that he is a supplemental roster player. Again, I can't believe that happened, but he will be on the supplemental roster formally whenever they update this. I think the other interesting thing we learned here is we already knew that Joseph Rosales had signed as a TAM player, our only TAM player. Julio Cascante was our only one last year. He was gone in the offseason. Joseph Rosales was signed as a TAM player. He was our only one. But we got the news that Dani Pereira signed a new contract a few weeks back. Dani Pereira's name now also appears as a TAM player on this. What that means is that Dani Pereira, who a few seasons back was making essentially like senior minimum, and then kind of had some small raises throughout the year, got a bump to like 450 or 500K last season or whenever that was. As a 10 player, it means he is making at least, I think it's 808,000. Let's call it 800,000 just to keep it as an even number, but that's a big payday for Dani there.
Yeah, if you just think about, because we talk about how like often the money in Major League Soccer is not competitive with a lot of other professional sports, or in the U.S. or competitive with other leagues around the world. But if you think about like this guy, like this becomes like a life-changing amount of money, like life-changing for Dani and like future generations of Danis, like if it's managed correctly. So it's good for him he's been able to do that. And it also makes me think that maybe like maybe Dani becomes an MLS lifer in Austin, making this kind of money where he's like, he's got family here, he's got a good life here. Like, why chase something else? And like, that would be great for Austin, I think, if that's like Dani's ultimate trajectory.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And like that, if he hadn't just come to that decision on his own, like making this kind of money in this league where like the quality of life in MLS is better than a lot of other leagues, just from what we hear about what players who come here from other countries say. And so if you're get that side of it and are one of the higher paid players, if you're not counting DPs or whatever, but like you're in the upper tiers of MLS salaries at this point, yeah, you might be tempted to stay here a little bit longer. I think there's some interesting, like maybe some interesting strategy at work from Burrell here, where I don't know, like I don't know what a player like Dani Pereira should be at, like what salary he should be on. I wouldn't be shocked if, let's say, Roto values him at a salary of 750K. But in order to free up some extra GAM by putting him over that 800K mark, you can use this TAM, which we're not using at this point, right? Like we're not using it for anybody but
Right.
Rosales. There's still quite a bit left. You can now use all the TAM on Dani's contract. That frees up extra GAM to use elsewhere. So I think there's probably at least a little bit of that played into why this number ended up where it was. We'll get the GAM numbers released. It says on this roster profile, available the week of March 2nd. Today, as of recording, is March 2nd. So we should be getting the GAM numbers soon. According to what we kind of knew, and then Roto kind of confirmed this in his press conference the other day, or the other week, is that like that money's gone already. Like they announced it as 2 million something at the beginning of the season. He's like, that is before applying it to get to compliance and everything. Like that money's gone. And so we now have those 2 international roster slot trades. Maybe that already has been applied to something as well. But I'm not expecting a lot of money to show up there. But any that is there is probably available because Dani Pereira is a TAM player.
Let's move on to the news on Friday that Austin FC 2 announced their additions to its MLS Next Pro roster. And I think the most interesting part of this is 5 Austin FC first-team players have signed loan agreements making them eligible to compete for both Micah Burton, CJ Fodre, Damian Loss, Raleigh Thomas, and Irvin Torres. So they can play both for the first team or the second team.
Yeah, I saw some confusion about this, which fair enough. Like it is, MLS is confusing. We all know that. But some confusion about like what that meant for guys like Damian. And I think some people took it to say like, okay, these guys are just on the second team forever now. And that's not exactly how it works. So all it means is like these guys who are on first team contracts are now allowed to also play for the second team whenever they want, but they can freely move back and forth. So Irvin Torres was on the bench for the first team on Sunday. He then went to Palmer Field that night and started for the second team. That's the kind of fluidity that they can have. I think with Riley Thomas and Irvin especially, I think you'll probably see them spend a lot of time with the second team, if not all of their time with the second team. Micah Burton, the same. Micah was also he wasn't on the bench for this one, but then like as we're approaching Open Cup, if they're gonna give Damian Loss a start in the Open Cup, like they did with Steph Cleveland last year, give Damian some minutes with the second team leading up to the Open Cup so he can get some actual game time under his belt. And he's able to do that because of this loan. So that's essentially all it means, is that they have freedom to kind of move back and forth.
Yeah, because like CJ's played, he's one of those guys, and he's played in both the matches. Not only made the roster, but like played in both matches for the first team, but still remains eligible to play for the second team too. Yeah, talk about Alice Due. Like he had a pretty big week too, didn't he? Like in the Austin FC 2 loss this week, where maybe we're going to see, maybe there's a future for him on the first team, but it probably means the first team, like things have not turned out the way that we want it to, because it still feels like a, in case of emergency, break glass kind of situation for him.
Yeah, Austin FC 2 played their season opener at Palmer Field later that night after the first team game against DC. So they played Minnesota United 2. They gave up a hat trick in the first 40 minutes, got a red card in the 80th minute, and I think it might have been 4-0, and then Alice Due, or maybe it was 3-0, and there's a goal in between, but it ended up 4-2 with Jorge Alice Due scoring a brace. And so he's still he's not going to go quietly, and after not being selected to be full-time on this first team. But yeah, I was kind of thinking like, Jorge, go get 25 goal contributions this season and make it to where they can't ignore you for the first team contract, thinking like he's probably not going to do that, but then scores a brace in the first game. Was like, okay, I'll shut up now.
I mean, go for it. Yeah. Well, you want to move on to the Charlotte preview now?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start off with some details about the watch party. Yeah, so the Los Verdes watch party. Jeremiah, give us some details about that.
So this is going to be the first watch party this season. Watch party start time 5 o'clock, kickoff 6:30 because we're playing on the East Coast on Saturday. It's at Hop Squad, all ages, dog friendly, free parking, food trucks, merch, $5 beers, which is always a favorite. So it should be a good time on that night. Always good to get together with other supporters and watch an away match. Hop Squad, always around for the Austin FC community from the beginning. And it feels like, wait, I don't know. I haven't seen the weather. I was going to say it should be a good night to watch soccer, but I feel like also maybe a rainy night. So TBD on what the weather contributes. But there's indoor and outdoor space both. So even if it's like the weather's a little not great, like you can still enjoy it.
Yeah, and on the notes we have here, it says merch sales by Los Verdes Dispensary, who makes enamel pins, Cuidate, and then Dan Lewis. I'm not sure what Dan is making, but another quick story from Landon's lore.
Yeah.
Dan's brother, Tony Lewis, and I played in a band together when I was 18 years old. And Tony was one of my brother's friends, my older brother's friends. Always talked about his younger brother Dan, and like, oh, you guys remind me of each other. You got to meet Dan sometime. This was 20 years ago, and I finally meet Dan Lewis because he's moved to Austin and is now an Austin FC fan.
So buy whatever Dan Lewis is selling.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's probably good.
Okay. Well, so 2025, Charlotte has a pretty good year, 59 points, fourth in the Eastern Conference. Lost in the first round of the playoffs to NYCFC. One of the things I was reading the Back Heel preview today, one of the things is I think people don't appreciate is like they've established themselves as a pretty decent club in the Eastern Conference, like not at the top, but like not a wooden spoon contender. Not a lot of big names, but still like a solid roster build, but a little bit under the radar. So this is not it's not DC United. This is not one that Austin should like necessarily go into expecting the automatic victory.
Yeah, So they lost one of their big players last season in Alison Malanda, one of the best center backs in the league, period. They sell him to England for, I think, something like $8 million. So a big transfer out. They brought in Henry Kessler, who started off in MLS as like kind of a young, promising guy, had some good seasons, has had some injuries. So they bring him in. He is injured now. So I don't think he's going to be available for this game. So they've been playing a center back pairing of Tim Ream and Andrew Privet. Andrew Privet has his qualities. He's not as much of a lockdown, just high quality defender as Malanda was. Tim Ream, looking at the last couple of games, looks like maybe he's lost a step at the age of 38 years old or whatever it is. So he got pretty roasted in their 3-0 loss against the Galaxy. So a team whose like main deal is kind of playing conservatively, not giving up a lot, and then letting some talented players maybe make something in the final third and score goals. They're not really creating chances right now. They're not scoring goals, and they're not playing very good defense. And so they're kind of in a rough way right now. I don't think we should expect them to stay in that way because they still have a lot of really good players. They also brought in Luca De La Torre, who is at San Diego, has played for the U.S. men's national team. And then talk about Henry Kessler, who they brought in, was probably going to be their starter at center back, and he's not available, so they're missing him. Looking at their attack on paper by like pedigree and past, like it looks like a team who should be really dangerous in the attack and just hasn't really been towards the end of last season and in this season. But Pep Biel, who's playing as their 10, he's a good player. Like I think he's really solid. But they have Wilfred Zaha, had some really good stretches last year, but has not looked good this season yet. Idan Toklamati, who had a really good back half of last year, young striker, has not had a lot to do this year. Liel Abada, who I think Austin FC was linked to by rumors at least before he came and signed for Charlotte. He's been a little disappointing. Kerwin Vargas, I think is his name, is their other winger. Like he's not been too terribly great. So a lot of individuals who seem like they should be doing better, but just haven't been at the end of last season and for the start of this season. So I think, like, hopefully their defensive woes continue and Austin can actually capitalize on some of that and score some goals. But at the very least, we need to hope that their attack continues to sputter and we're able to shut these guys down, because Wilfred Zaha is still Wilfred Zaha. If he goes off and plays to the level that he is capable of, he is a really dangerous player, but he's not doing it right now. Hopefully that continues.
Well, what do we expect to see different from Austin, like in terms of lineup or formation or positions between the team that played DC United and the team that plays next week? We talked about like maybe we get Dessler back, so maybe John Gallagher goes to the bench, but are there any other changes that you would expect to see? And we talked about like hoping there would be changes to Rosales, but from all the Nico comments, I don't know that I believe that's going to happen. Like what would you do in this situation? Or what do you think he'll do in this situation?
I wouldn't be shocked to see the exact same starting 11 again. Just with Dessler having not really played that much, I think it would be a lot to ask him to step in and go 70 or 80 or 90 in his first game back. So I wouldn't be surprised to see John Gallagher get the start. And then if Dessler is ready and available, to see him get subbed on later in the game. Going from less of what I expect to see and what I would do is I would like to see Joseph Rosales not play on the right wing. I would want to see him and Nelson get swapped over. Like maybe you're losing a little bit of comfortability and quality from Nelson, but I think you would gain a lot more from Rosales by doing it. But outside of that, I mean, do we see Christian Ramirez get a start?
I don't think that.
Like, why not
see that? Well, I feel
He's
like
fit.
I don't know. He's fit, but I mean, I feel like in my head, Mircea Uzuni's ego is fragile enough that I feel like you would break him to like put him on the bench after this performance. Maybe it doesn't matter, like ultimately in the long run, but like at least between now and the summer, like Austin needs to get the most that they can on Mircea Uzuni. So like maybe Ramirez comes in earlier. Maybe he comes in like for Mircea, right? Because he didn't come in for Mircea in his last match.
Yeah, no, they were on the field for
they're on the field together
the rest of the game together, I think.
Yeah. So like maybe see him come on as a direct sub, which is kind of what I was expecting to see, but I don't think you make that move right now. I guess ultimately, I don't see a path where Austin gets blown out in Charlotte, and I don't see a path where Austin blows Charlotte out. So I feel like this is a lot of what we've seen so far, where it comes down to what happens around the edges, what happens around set pieces, who takes advantage of like probably limited amount of opportunities that they're going to have because of the way these teams play. And I think this is one of these games that's going to be, on a razor's edge, where it's going to be a tie. It's going to be a 1-goal win either way. Maybe it's 2-1 at the most, but like I'm not expecting a lot of firepower out of this match on Saturday.
Yeah, if you look at Austin's schedule following this game, we have away at RSL. RSL has looked pretty good in these opening games. Plus, you're going to altitude there, which is always a struggle. You have home against LAFC. We know who LAFC are. Away to Miami. We know who Miami are. And then home against LA Galaxy, who have looked really dangerous this season so far, too. So it's a tough stretch of games. It would be really good for momentum and morale and standings in the table for Austin to get 3 points in this game away in Charlotte. No road game in MLS is easy. No game in MLS is easy. But Charlotte is in a state right now where if Austin comes at this with that mentality and is able to take advantage of Charlotte kind of not being in a good state, these 3 points would be really important to pick up with what's coming after it.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about the results like so far, but I mean, 4 points in 2 matches, like aesthetically, was it the most pleasing thing in the world? Probably not, but that puts Austin in a pretty good trajectory, like starting off. You would hate to have lost to Minnesota or ended up drawing to DC. So I feel like Austin's at least lived up to expectations for a team that's going to be pretty good so far. And so getting something out of the Charlotte match is just another step forward in what we can hope from if this team's going to be a good team at the end of the year.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Do we need to cover anything else, Jeremiah?
No, let's wrap it up, man.
All right. We'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week to review the Charlotte match and preview another away match, which is at RSL, and we'll cover any other Austin FC news that happens. Until then, I'm Landon Cottam.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
When no one is around.
Think for nothings, you never.
La gente.
Oh my God.
Because they love the cheap boom boom sauce.
Yeah.